This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
I shudder thinking how the world can be so cruel. I lend my voice to those who can't. It's time we try, it's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Welcome to the Special Chronicles podcast. My name is Daniel Smrokowski. I'm the founder and host of Special Chronicles, an EnergyForce ambassador with ComEd. Our website, specialchronicles.com. To follow Special Chronicles on socials, subscribe to our newsletter, find the show notes for this episode, and all of our different series on specialchronicles.com. This week on the Special Chronicles podcast EnergyForce series, season 8, Pt4. Our returning guest is Kelvin Limbrick, and who was, I believe, making he's now a 3-time guest. We'll double check when we bring him on. But our topic this week is the ComEd goats, which is a new topic that I'm just learning about as we will putting this season's podcast series together. But please put both your hands together as we welcome Kelvin back on the Special Chronicles podcast EnergyForce series.
Hey, Daniel, how's it going?
Hey, it's good to have you back on the program, and I think that this now makes you a 3-time guest.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, I've been hanging out with you for the 3rd time now, and I'm excited for this episode. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Awesome. And so before we get into talking everything all about goats, I thought we could just tone it over to you just to open us up with this week's topic.
Yeah. So I know we've kind of gotten to know each other over the last year and a half or so, but I felt like maybe a little icebreaker might be fun. So I'm curious. Do you know how much a goat weighs?
I've never actually lifted a goat before, but I would think I would say pretty heavy, maybe a few hundred pounds.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the breed, but in this case, I almost gave away the answer. It's enough to break the ice.
Awesome. There we go. I should have played this one.
Oh,
here we go.
Myself. Yeah.
Awesome. And so when we were planning the topics for this season of this EnergyForce series, this was a new topic that I didn't know that much about. And so seeing, for those of you listening to the audio podcast, go check out the video and you will see the t-shirt that you're wearing. Got questions, I got answers, because I've got, as no pun intended, but I've got, as you saw in the show notes, I've got, and I'm sure our listeners have as well, we have questions. And so you, going off of your t-shirt, you must have a lot of goat answers, right?
Yep, every day. That's why I'm here. I'm the expert on the goats. So
awesome. Well, just like last week's episode and last year's episode about trees and Earth Day, also about goats, and that it sounds like a fun T-shirt that you're wearing. That I think you're telling me before we went on air that it's not for sale. Is that correct?
Yeah, unfortunately. So the ComEd has some really cool volunteering shirts that they come out with depending on the events, and we'll get into it, I think, in sort of the second segment. But we do sort of a celebration of the goats either after they come back from the field or before they go out in downtown Chicago. And this was one of the shirts that they gave to us for volunteering to help out with the event and showing up and answering questions and all that.
Awesome. So, before we get to that, can you tell us a little bit more about the concept of using goats for and if our listeners want to hear a little bit more about vegetation management, last week's episode where we celebrated Oath Day, you talked a little bit more about vegetation management. But now, as we talk, can you tell us a little bit more about the concept of using goats for vegetation management under power lines and how this idea came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So in previous episodes, we've talked about the idea behind vegetation management is to provide safe and reliable power. And sometimes that means clearing out trees in our transmission rights of way. We try to manage for grassland in an effort to keep it clear for access, visibility, and to meet federal and state regulations. So the concept of using goats is called targeted grazing. Well, I guess I should say that the concept of using livestock for vegetation management is called targeted grazing. And then the idea is that you use a specific livestock for a specific management goal. And so we use goats because they like to eat absolutely everything. They'll eat thistles, they like woody vegetation. So all those shrubs and weeds that we don't want in the right of way, they'll just mow them down. And so their specific goal is to rob all those plants of their energy, because as the goats eat them, then they have to try and grow back. And so eventually the idea is, like, instead of spraying with herbicide to kill it, the goats nibble on it and they nibble it to death. The other place that we'd want to use them is that is where there's steep terrain. So we don't have a lot of that in Illinois. But we do have a couple areas, further north towards Wisconsin or down towards Peoria and Springfield, where it's like a 64-foot, 64-foot decline, and then like 70 to 80 degree grade, where walking up and down it is a real workout. And when you're doing it with a chainsaw or dragging brush or what have you, it can be relatively risky. So we put the goats in those areas because they are experts at climbing. And so they climb around, they nibble everything down to the ground. And as a result, we can keep our crews safe and hit the land management goals that we want to.
Awesome. And how do the goats contribute to keeping the power grid resilient and preventing power outage in northern Illinois? I'm sure, especially now. I mean, we're recording this in the springtime. This episode is airing at the end of June, and so during this spring, summertime, I'm sure that there's usually a lot of storms and the powers, the power. There's a lot of power outages. So how do the goats help to contribute to the power grid and preventing power outages?
Yeah, so the goats are more of a long-term solution for our regularly scheduled maintenance. And so the idea is that hopefully all the vegetation is, maybe 6 foot at its absolute tallest when they get out there. So we're hoping that this is already a pretty clean space that they're working in. They're just sort of helping us keep those really steep cliffs or maybe not cliffs, but really steep grades that we might need a goat for to keep them clean in perpetuity. So we typically put them out. Our transmission system is on a 5-year cycle. So the first year we tend to cut through. The second and third years come through and cut. The second and third years, we maintain that to keep all the vegetation low and make sure nothing comes back after they cut. And then in the fourth and fifth year, we typically leave it. When the goats are on the system, what we do is we usually put them out for the first 3 years. So they do their own maintenance. And then year 4 and 5, the landscape tends to rest. And then we'll do it again. So we have 2 sites that we're doing this year. One is out in Peoria. Another one's closer to Starved Rock and in Oglesby, LaSalle County. And what they'll be doing down there is hopefully just eating the fresh shoots, because they were on those sites last year. So they're already pretty clear sites. But they're making sure that we don't have to worry about sending a tree crew through in the future is how they're contributing.
Awesome. And just like, I'm going to try to kind of put a little entertainment type entertaining joke to this next question, but we'll bring it back to be informal because we always like to not to be too dry with giving information to our listeners. But just like you and myself, and I guess just like humans get selected for jobs, goats have to get selected for jobs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are these goats selected for the job? And in case well, we have a lot of humans that listen to this podcast, but in case we have any goats that are listening, because you never know, we might have some goats that are listening. In case we have some goats that are listening to this podcast, could talk to our goat listeners and how are the goats selected for the job, and what makes them ideal for vegetation management in these areas? Because I'm sure a lot of our goat listeners might want to get selected for this job.
Well, Daniel, first off, I'm going to say that in the context of greatest of all times, I bet your listeners are all goats.
Yes.
I hope nobody takes offense to that. But
sure.
Yeah, they're all amazing. You couldn't do without them, right? So in that case, you've got quite a few good goats listening. But so the goats, they're basically predisposed for the job. They're born to do it. And certain breeds have pros and cons. So initially when we started, we really wanted to use a breed called Kiko goats because they're known for eating just an absolute ton. Their heritage is that they come out of the mountains, or they're bred with a wild mountain goat, so they're even better at climbing than the average species. But the problem is that because they have that innate climbing ability, they can also jump really well. So unless you have a really good fencing system or some kind of a geo collar to make sure you know where they are or keep them from escaping, there's a good chance they'll get away. And so that was not an option. Plus, we are kind of subject to what the contractors have available. So I know there's a couple other utilities in New York, the New York Power Authority and the Rochester Power Group. They do. They actually have a rescue. They have rescue goats that they use to manage their land, and so they have all different types of breeds. And I know that our contractors, they tend to have a pretty diverse herd as well, and they may intend to get Kikos in the future, but it's going to be an investment to make sure they can stay on system and they don't get away. But yeah, their goats are pretty amazing as a whole. So they're ruminants, which means that they've got 4-chambered stomachs. So whatever they eat, they digest really well, and they fertilize the row behind them. If they happen to eat any seeds, what ends up happening is that those 4 stomachs break down the seeds so that if there's a species that we don't want in the right of way that they're eating, it won't be regrowing. It's not going to end up going through their system and then landing in the soil and popping back up again. Whereas if we were to try to, drag that brush out, we might be dropping seeds everywhere, which is also kind of nice. And they're really good at defoliating plants up to 6 feet. So they'll nibble the bark at the bottom, and that tends to kill the plant. But they can also stand up on their hind legs. And goats are really good at teamwork. So they'll push it down together, and then they all go at it, which is always awesome to see. But yeah, no, that's if there are any true animal goats listening, and you guys are looking for a job, you are more than qualified. And I say you walk into that interview and you tell them exactly that you're born to do it, and I think you'll be good.
Awesome. So if anyone goes are listening, I don't know if you guys know how to email or what. I don't think that any goats would be on X because they're only partly bodes, partly tweet. But I don't know what social platform goats are on. But yeah, you guys know how to get in touch. Can you? Yeah. Can you explain how the goats are integrated into the vegetation management program, and do they work alongside the transitional crews, or do they operate independently?
Yeah, so the goats tend to operate independently. We don't have them working on traditional crews, but we do use the traditional crews to get them set up. So, like I said, goats tend to be more useful for some of the smaller stuff. So, if we happen to have a larger tree in that steep area where the goats are working, we would have to send a human crew to remove it, or sometimes we need to cut a path for the trailer to get the goats back into the area where they're going to be, because they tend to be fairly remote sites. And so the human crews will go and prepare the site prior to the goats arriving, or because everything will be all thinned out after the goats are done, they may go in and address certain issues after the fact, after they've been on the system for a couple weeks. But no, they're all on their own. We do go out and visit them regularly, just for fun, hang out, get to know them a little bit better.
Awesome. It's always good to get to know our goat friends, whether they're the greatest of all time friends or the ones with 4 legs as well. And just like us, listeners might get tired of us comparing goats to humans, but just like humans go through training, I'm sure that the goats go through training to get ready for work. So what kinds of training do the goats go through to get ready for work, if any as well? Maybe they don't need any training, but what kind of training do the goats go through?
Yeah, no, fortunately they don't need any training. However, I can say that, one of the locations we've done in the past is on the Peoria National Guard Air Force Base, and they do have to go through security. So they're all subject to inspections just like everybody else. Fortunately, I think it's a little more streamlined. We just run them through the metal detector, but yeah, everybody gets background checked, and then I think the goats list is pretty short, but they are still required to hit all those safety regulations.
And just like we go through the TSA when we fly or go through security, they're the same way, because I'm sure you want to make sure that they're not hiding anything under their hoofs or
no concealed aerosol cans or anything like that.
Awesome. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll get into talking just briefly about how ComEd is sharing the goat story publicly, and some of the benefits and challenges, and then some fun, lighthearted questions at the end after a quick break, because it costs. It's free for you to listen, but it costs money to produce this podcast. And so this episode is brought to you by listeners like you. Please join our supporters with a monthly or one-time donation so we can operate our studio and continue our mission, giving respect and voice to people with disabilities. Visit specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give to support this podcast. And if you want to access bonus content, not on this episode, but we've got tons of other bonus content for you to listen to or watch. You can join now at specialchronicles.com/plus. That's specialchronicles.com/plus. And I'm sure this podcast is one way that you all letting the public know about how ComEd is one way to tell the public about the goat story. But what are some fun ways that ComEd is sharing the goat story publicly?
Yeah, so you as you've seen here, the goats are a ton of fun to talk about, and everybody always wants to hear about them. So one of the things that we like to do, our big main event, is we have sort of a coming or going celebration. So sometimes it's after they get done in the field, we celebrate them. Sometimes it's when they're going out. I will say that personality-wise, not all of these goats are public friendly. So we do have Milk and Shake, who are our ambassador goats. You'll see a couple others around, but they tend to be the ones that are really interested in getting to know their adoring public. And it's a cute combo, but what you might realize if you see them is that shake is brown and milk is white. So they're a nice little combination, you know, fun play on words for maybe maybe their fur color. But yeah, no, they're so comfortable with being out and about. They like being petted and held. I did get bitten once, unfortunately. They were having a hard day for career day. We brought some school students in as well as ComEd employees. They could learn more about what we do in vegetation management. And I right around lunchtime, I made the mistake of taking a break and hanging out with the goats, and they've been busy being fed by everybody, so they thought my finger was hay. It didn't hurt, but it was still one of those ones like, oh, okay, sorry. But no, otherwise, lots of fun. They're great. The past events have been we had sort of a goats on boats where we went around the Chicago River. I think last year was goats on a trolley or something to that effect, where we toured them around on buses. And all around, Hot Goat Summer, that was another good one. And then during COVID, we did the Goat Turnship program, which was prior to me getting involved with the program. But there's some videos online that are very entertaining with the goats wearing little hard hats and shirts.
Awesome.
Yeah, but we get nationwide PR for it, which is always cool. So the news channels will pick it up from LA to New York. It's
awesome. Awesome. So I'll if our listeners want to see some of those videos, is the best way to Google or if you share some links with me, I'll put it in the description of this episode on specialchronicles.com. But what's the best way to find some of those videos?
You know, I'm going to have to do some looking myself. I wasn't prepared for that. I am very lucky in that all of these things are just on my work computer. So whenever I'm having a bad day, I just pull up the GOAT internship program or whatever, or they're on my phone. So I'll get back to you on that one maybe after we're done chatting here.
Awesome. So for those of you listening in, we'll hopefully, if you go to the show notes for this GOATs episode, or if you go to specialchronicles.com/ComEd or specialchronicles.com /ComEd. I think that's where we've got a list of resources on there. We'll try to maybe put some GOAT videos or resources on there as well. I think that's where it is. Yeah. As we move into some of the benefits and challenges, the terrain in areas like Oak can be rocky and steep, making vegetation management challenging. How do the goats excel in these types of environments? And particularly in how to in these types of environments compared to traditional methods.
So the terrain in Oglesby can be particularly steep, which makes vegetation management challenging, sort of as we've discussed. And one of the things that we're really concerned about is that while the human crews could do it, it'll take them extra time because they have to go slow and be very conscious about where they're putting their feet and how much effort they're putting in, especially because a lot of times, you know, it might be summer or spring. And, you know, we've kind of talked about how it can be stormy in the spring or nasty in the summer as well with the heat. And, you know, even if you don't have that and we were there in the winter, you still have to deal with potentially snow or you know, a lack of vegetation, which might be muddy as well. So, you know, putting our contractors in these situations, our human contractors in these situations, worried about slips, trips, and falls. And while they're very careful, there might also be the chance that, you know, we spill something like gasoline or oil for the chainsaws. And then, you know, these tend to be sensitive areas. They're in watershed corridors, and there's typically a creek that runs through them. And so we don't want to have any kind of environmental or human safety issue. And so by bringing the goats in, the huge benefit is that we don't have to worry about that. They eat, they don't have to spill, we're not worried about them spilling gasoline. They're really good at climbing, so the chance that they'll fall and hurt themselves is not a concern. And so that's the big one. The downside is that maybe the challenge is that you can't tell a goat what to do or have a conversation with them like you can with the human crew. So if you want to ask them, well, what do you need to do better? Or if you're like, hey, you missed that patch over there, they kind of go, I'm a goat. So that's in a nutshell.
Awesome. So what are some of the? I'm sure as we've talked about in the past, safety is an important part, especially when it comes to power lines, and like you shared in the last segment about being bitten by goats. Want to make sure that if they come in contact with any goats, that they do so safely. So, what are some of the environmental and safety benefits of using goats for vegetation management, especially in how to reach areas?
Yeah, so the benefits is kind of, as I mentioned, is you don't have to worry about slip trips and falls with the human crews, which is kind of nice. We also get the free fertilizer, which is the environmental benefit, and we don't have to worry about soil disturbance from machines or human footprint, and then also the reduced concerns of any kind of chemical or environmental spill. And then just like for as far as safety when interacting with the goats, always remember that every animal is sort of their own individual, and you have to sort of read their body language and address it, just like people, right? So we're all our own people. We've got our strengths and our weaknesses, and we can all bite. So
awesome. Just quick, did you say that we can all bite, or the goats can all bite?
Both is true, but I was just, tying it into people. We're all different and we can all bite. So, don't put your fingers in your mouths that you don't want.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to how does ComEd ensure that the goats are, because we want to make sure that, just like we want to make sure that our fellow humans are well cared for.
Right.
We're probably taking this human and goat comparison maybe a little too far in this episode, but our listeners can see how humans and goats are all related. We all have full legs or full, yeah. How does ComEd ensure that the goats are well cared for while they're working, and what kind of support do the goats have on site?
Yeah, so goats need a lot of water when they're eating vegetation to help them digest. So most of these sites have some form of a stream, and we make sure that we only put them out there when there's water available. They also obviously have plenty to eat. We don't keep them out any longer than we have to. There are a lot of considerations as far as when they arrive and when they leave as to what the temperature's like, because they do have to ride in a trailer, and so we don't. If the temperatures are too high and it's too humid, we'll actually either move the schedule back a little bit until we can get them out into the right of way, or when it comes to leaving the right of way, we might leave them in the shade on the right of way a little bit longer before trying to remove them. Their caretaker also visits them every 24 hours, so they'll check in on a regular basis. And we come out and we do safety observations on the goats that are absolutely incredibly professional and aren't fun at all. It's work, and it wouldn't be work if we were having fun, right?
Absolutely. And I just you mentioned how the care workers have a caretaker, and just I don't want this to sound. I'm not making fun with this next comment. I just want to put that disclaimer out there. But disability community, a lot of us with disabilities, if you live independently, might have a care worker that. So like there's that kind of, just to kind of connect it back to a big part of our audience here, to the goats kind of align with humans that way as well. Hopefully we're not taking this human to goat comparison a little too far, but it's all in fun, right?
Right, all in fun, all in good fun.
Oh yeah, because sometimes if you're just listening to a podcast that's just dry with, like, because I'm sure we could get behind them, maybe not on this podcast series, but maybe another podcast if they cover goats or a lot of these energy and solar efficiency education topics might be more dry. But we like to also kind of throw a little entertainment, fun spin to things. So, sustainability and innovation is another is a couple of the big topics that ComEd is it's important to ComEd. And so how does the use of goats align with ComEd's broader sustainability and innovation goals? And are there plans to expand this program in the future in case there are other power companies across the country or across the globe that might be tuning in? How can you talk a little bit about how the use of goats aligns with ComEd's broader sustainability and innovation goals and plans to expand the goat program in the future?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is that at ComEd, we have a large territory here in Northern Illinois, about 127,000 acres. And I know definitely not the biggest of utilities. There are some that span multiple states. But we have a lot of different land types here in the Prairie State. And using the goats as a tool in the toolbox is valuable for us in sort of these areas that have a little bit more terrain. And I definitely think it's worth looking into. I know that there are other land management goals like invasive species control that people have looked at using goats for, as far as other power companies, other utilities. Out west, they use them for sort of beating back invasives to prevent wildfires. And there are some groups that use them for maintaining their landscape. Like I think there are a couple airports that use them. And so there's a lot of opportunity with goats, but they're just another tool in the toolbox next to our traditional crews, using herbicide, our drones, even fire, using prescribed fire is something that we kind of rarely do. And depending on the setting and the need, that's the best time to use them innovation wise. But we are always looking for new opportunities. And I think goats is a really good one that helps fit this as far as hitting that safety goal, as well as maintaining and being good environmental stewards in the right of way.
Awesome. And we talked about vegetation management at the beginning, and want to come back to that. As besides helping with vegetation management, how do the goats impact the local ecosystem and the communities where these goats are working?
Yeah, so goats are voracious, and so if we leave them out long enough, they'll eat the woody shrubs, the broadleaf plants, and then they'll start working on the grasses and forbs that make up the right of way. And the flowers and grasses are the things that we want to try to keep there, one for erosion control, but also to outcompete those shrubs coming back, shrubs and trees. So timing is really important with targeted grazing. You want to make sure you don't leave them out too long, or else they will sort of clear everything and it'll be an ecological issue. And so, it's important to consider how they're impacting the local ecosystem that way. I'd be really interested to see, and this is one of those things that I'm kind of looking for on a day-to-day basis, the good study that says when you use targeted grazing, these are the environmental results. And, these are the pros and cons you need to be careful of. Targeted grazing isn't a new thing, but I haven't seen a study like that yet for Northern Illinois. And so that's something that I think I'd like to see in the future. And I'm looking for opportunities to have that research done here at ComEd. That'd be really cool. But one of the benefits is that if we get the timing right, then they're removing a lot of species that we don't necessarily want on our right of way, either for compatibility purposes, they'll get too tall and it'll be a problem as far as our safety and regulations. But by removing, or it'll be something that we don't want on our right of way because it's not native to the U.S. and it kind of crowds everything out and causes access and visibility issues. So by removing those, we're actually promoting those grasses and flowers that I was speaking about earlier, and those nectar-bearing plants. So it's a benefit for pollinators, and then and then that's our goal as a whole throughout the transmission system, is to promote integrated vegetation management where we have a nice prairie at the end of the day, or some kind of a grassland that is beneficial for the environment and the animals and plants and everybody that goes along with it.
Awesome. And with the success that the program has had so far, is ComEd considering any other innovative, eco-friendly solutions to further improve the power reliability?
Yeah, so we're always looking. I think one of the things that we tend to find in a lot of our meeting and day-to-day interactions when we're trying to brainstorm is that while there's always room for improvement, we're in a really good spot. So we've looked at a couple opportunities recently and haven't come to any major conclusions, but trying to find ways to recycle all of our wood chips from trimming and removals is always a little bit of a difficult task. As of right now, they all go to get mulched and then sold as mulch, which is kind of nice. And then we've talked about the Zoo Browse program. I think that was last year, where a lot of our trimmings go to Lincoln Park, Brookfield, or Phillips Park and Aurora for the animals to munch on. And that's really good for their dental health and their mental stimulation. It kind of gives them some variety in day-to-day meal. But we've also sort of debated doing biochar, or looking into biochar as a solution to dispose of some of the wood. And so that's one of those things that could potentially create or generate power. And we've sort of made the connections there, but we're still exploring, or I think our potential partners are still exploring the business model and looking at, whether or not it is a solution they want to pursue. And then drones are always top of mind. And they're advancing their capabilities, so they have LiDAR and infrared and all kinds of different tool attachments they can use to look up and down the right of way, or even identify different plant species based on their signatures. And so that's something that I think is very promising for the future, because then we can fly a drone and they can, it'll just do everything, and we won't have to worry about anything anymore. No, it's an expensive technology, and so it's still one of those things that we're looking at. But it could be an alternative to a gas vehicle. And then fire is another one that could be used infrequently to reduce fuel load. Fire also tends to be very expensive and labor intensive, and so it's not great in every situation. But we use it in our ComEd Prairie program to help promote the growth of a lot of native species and maintain prairie quality.
Awesome. We got one, before we get to the final segment, we're going to take a quick break, because if it wasn't for the sponsors of this podcast, then we wouldn't be able to keep the lights on, keep the microphone plugged in, audio, video, website hosting, all of that. And so just like we kicked the episode off with a fun, lighthearted opening, we're going to come full circle and conclude with some fun, lighthearted questions as we wrap up, because we want you all to remember that it's all fun and lighthearted with the goats. So we'll be right back to let you all know that this episode is brought to you by the ComEd EnergyForce Ambassador Program, the country's first energy and solar efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. Learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd, at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. And this episode is brought to you by United Airlines Bridge Disability Business Resource Group, connecting people of all abilities, including hiring Special Olympics athletes like myself as employees. Learn more on United's commitment to disability inclusion for employment and travel at specialchronicles.com/United, at specialchronicles.com/United. And back to the program as we get to some fun, lighthearted questions as we wrap up in this final segment. I think the last episode was about half an hour, but we'll reach in 40 minutes, which it's always just, I think the first time that you were on the program, I think it ended up being a 1 hour episode about trees. And so now it's always, I guess, fun to, when kind of going back to the beginning of this episode, when, and going back to your t-shirt goat, how I have lots of goat questions and you have lots of goat answers. So we'll bring it back to some fun what's the most surprising thing that you've learned about working with goats doing this program?
Yeah, so I think they tend to each have their own little personality or little quirks. Some are fun, and others just want to get to work. They're just very voracious and love to eat. And then some just want to sleep, or the younger ones. If we get some kids in the right of way, they tend to prefer to play or hang out with mom rather than do anything else. So they like to try to focus on that middle age group where there's a little order, but. I was asking my manager Tom's like, what's been surprising for you, and he said that Teddy Grahams and Cheez-Its tend to go quickly. If you bring a snack into the right of way, they'll take it from you.
Just like it kind of goes back to young humans. I've got a young niece and nephew that are 3 and 1, and so just like young humans like to take snacks, the young goats like to do that as well. And just like all of us humans have unique personalities that we bring to our teams and we bring to our communities. Have any of these goats developed unique personalities that have made them favorites among the team or the community? Like just like I'm sure with your coworkers, your coworkers probably have the humans have unique personalities that make them favorites among your team. So have any of the goats developed made them favorites?
Yeah, so I don't know if I'd say necessarily favorites, but they definitely do have individual personalities. And I haven't had formal introductions to every single one of the goats. I see a lot of them in passing in the hallway while they're around the street. But they also do kind of, so it's kind of like a farm collection. So sometimes we have more, sometimes we have less. They get rotated around a little bit. I know a handful of them. There was one in particular that I was taking pictures on the edge of sort of the steeper slope before it goes down, the goat work area, if you will. And I had my camera and I go to turn around and there's one that's just like one of the bigger ones is just staring at me. And I looked at the caretaker and I said, is he friendly, or like, what's the deal here? And she was like, maybe best to stay away from that one. And I was kind of like, was I about to get knocked down the hill by a goat, or the issue here? So situational awareness is always important.
Awesome. And just like, I promise for our listeners, this will be the last human to goat comparison that we make on the program today. But just like humans have office quirks, like your favorite spots to graze in the office, whether you like to hang around the water fountain or the break room, or your favorite office to graze around. Do the goats have any office quirks, like favorite spots to graze, or any specific types of brush that they love the most?
Yeah, so I'd say that there are some that tend to sort of lead and protect, as I just described. And, there are lovers and cuddlers where if you go out there, they'll come right up to you and they just want some scratches. They'll hang out with you all day. If you sit down, there are some that will just lay down with you and get all the love you'll give them. And there are some that are a bit more bashful. But, as far as the types of brush that they like, I would say that a lot of the newer shoots. So we're hoping to get them out a little bit sooner this year than late summers. Typically when we do it around like August, September. If we get them out a little bit sooner, they might be more interested in eating some of that fresh green before it gets a little more woody and needs more chewing. So they'll eat almost anything. I wouldn't say that there's a particular species they go after more than the rest, but those fresh shoots, if they can get them, that's when they're standing up on their hind legs, they're trying to get the tippy top of the plant. That's the one I love. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sure that those a lot of human coworkers that might like maybe I shouldn't say like the cuddle, but like
No.
let's not say that. But maybe there might be human coworkers that might like to do similar stuff like goats, maybe. So
I definitely know some coworkers that really like to graze if you bring in some donuts. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bring in some donuts or cookies or definitely could just like if you bring some snacks for the goats to graze.
Yep.
Humans like to graze as well. So that's a good way to wrap up how humans and goats are all alike. So before we get to the final two questions, this conversation these questions have hopefully provided our listeners with a lot of insight into the unique and innovative aspects of the ComEd GOAT program, and while also keeping the conversation lighthearted and engagement. I'm sure all of those throughout this episode have really got the lighthearted and engaging part to this, because I think that's probably one of the best ways to give information to our listeners is to keep it lighthearted and engaging. So before we get to the final question, and we're going to put a little goat spin to the final question, but do you have any final thoughts on your overall time here today on the Special Chronicles podcast to share, and our EnergyForce series to share with our listeners?
No, it's always a pleasure to come on and chat with you, Daniel. I really appreciate you having me, and I like this. I do a lot of presentations on goats for other utilities, and I'll say that I have to ask how long the presentation should be, because I could talk about goats all day. I could do it in my sleep. I really enjoy it. So
awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So this is going to be an episode that we'll definitely have to share with a lot of our listeners to hear more about goats, because it's I know I didn't know, as you imagine, I had a lot of goat questions coming into this, and now hearing all of the tons of goat answers was definitely informative. So to introduce the final question, let's go ahead and play let's go ahead and roll that bumpo.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising.
Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone.
Was fear.
Difference.
Our demands are
Equality.
dignity,
and the recognition of our
Shared humanity. We will not stop.
or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
More divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution.
is inclusion.
Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
So we don't just want our listeners to listen to this, but to bring inclusion into their lives. And just like humans like to be included, and humans like to inclusion is a big part at ComEd. It's a big part of included, and I'm sure goats like to be celebrated, and inclusion is a big part. It's powerful how ComEd is not only being inclusive of humans, but of being inclusive of goats as well. Because I'm sure that there are different types of goats, and so we'll conclude with what does. And here's a kind of goat spin to this question, and because you answered it the way that I always ask it in last week's episode, but this time, what does inclusion of goats mean to you?
Inclusion of goats mean to me. I appreciate you switching it up on me. You kind of caught me off guard there because you didn't give me the heads up on this one. But inclusion of goats means to me that we're taking the opportunity to listen to each other and the different unique ideas that we have when we come to the table, because we had a challenge, and it was that we ran into this steep slope, and we were concerned that it was going to be an issue, it was going to be expensive, it was going to put our crews at risk, and it had environmental concerns. And somebody said, man, we really need a goat for this job. And then we said, no idea is too crazy. Let's see if we can make that work. And so sometimes I think it's very easy to be in a diverse room and tell yourself that maybe your idea isn't any good and that you need to, keep it to yourself. But I think the world is a better place when we all come to the table and bring all of our different goats together to work the right of way.
Awesome. I love that. Those perfect way to wrap up this this informative, lighthearted, and engaging episode all about goats. And I love that final message because there's a lot that, just like there's a lot that we can learn from our fellow humans, there's a lot that we can learn from our goats, not just the greatest of all time humans, but our furry goat friends. There's a lot that final message really spoke to how there's a lot that we can learn from goats. Awesome. So a few final plugs before we wrap up here. I want to let you know you can shop our merchandise store at Disabled Voices Matter merch. We have t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs. Disabled Voices Matter. You can shop our store and know that 60% of the profits will go back to Special Chronicles. Visit specialchronicles.com/shop and tap that follow button so you don't miss a new episode of the Special Chronicles podcast. Or if you go to specialchronicles.com/EnergyForce, you can find previous seasons and episodes. So you have lots of engaging topics related to solar and energy efficiency. That's produced in partnership with the ComEd EnergyForce Ambassador Program. And subscribe to our newsletter. Follow us on socials, specialchronicles.com for all those links to follow and subscribe. And don't forget to like, comment, do all that. You all know what to do with podcasts. And so, go and do that. So thank you again, Kelvin, for being a 3-time guest. And I'm sure if there's another topic, I'm sure it might be next season. But thank you again for taking the time to come on the Special Chronicles podcast EnergyForce series, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate it. Love hanging out with you. Have a good one.
Until then, everyone, we remember choose to include. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Chronicles podcast. Our podcast was produced by Daniel Smrokowski on the Special Chronicles Network. Follow Special Chronicles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Subscribe, rate, and review Special Chronicles on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, specialchronicles.com, where you can stream our archives of over 500 episodes absolutely for free. Also, there's a list of our favorites, original series, award-winning columns, and blogs. And sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive bonus content delivered to your inbox. Again, specialchronicles.com. Special Chronicles is hosted by Podbean Podcast Hosting. Our live streams are powered by StreamYard. Thanks, as always, to our business manager, Adam Smrokowski, who always encourages us to never give up. I'm Daniel Smrokowski, back next week with more stories.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
Is the thing still on?
Yeah.
One final note for all of you listening, and we've got to mention. Stay tuned to the season 8 of our EnergyForce series, because coming up some other topics that you do not want to miss. You can hear all about the education programs of ComEd, hear about the Switch on Summer event, hear about electric vehicles and EVs, advancements in solar, customer communication, and the holiday lights. So make sure to go to specialchronicles.com/EnergyForce to follow. Until then, we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.